The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty general store, and Faith Henderson pressed her palm against the fogged window, peering through the smudged glass at the town that would become her new home, hoping the man waiting for her was nothing like the monster she had fled back east. Galesburg, Illinois stretched before her in the late afternoon sun of August 1873, a modest frontier town with wooden buildings lining a wide dirt street. Faith smoothed her traveling dress with trembling fingers, aware that 3 months of correspondence with Ryder Matthews had led her to this moment. She had answered his advertisement in the Boston newspaper during her darkest hour, when her stepfather's debts threatened to force her into an arrangement she would rather die than accept. The driver opened the door, offering his weathered hand. Faith accepted it, stepping down onto the packed earth, her small trunk following behind her with a thud. Dust coated everything here, settling on her dark blue dress like powdered gold in the slanting light. "Miss Henderson," the voice came from her left, deep and uncertain. Faith turned to see a tall man approaching, removing his hat to reveal dark brown hair that fell just past his collar. His face was sun-bronzed, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he was not smiling now. He looked to be perhaps 28 or 29, with broad shoulders beneath a simple cotton shirt and vest. "Mr. Matthews," Faith found her voice, softer than she intended. "Yes, madam, Ryder Matthews." He stood about 6 feet away, as if afraid to come closer. His eyes, she noticed, were a striking gray-blue, like storm clouds over the ocean she had crossed once as a child. "I hope your journey was not too difficult." "It was long," Faith said honestly, "but I am grateful to have arrived safely." An awkward silence stretched between them. Faith studied the man who had offered her escape through his carefully written letters. In them, he had explained that he owned a cattle ranch 5 miles outside of town, that he was a widower who needed a wife to help manage his home, that he was honest and hardworking and wanted only a partnership based on mutual respect. He had not mentioned that he was handsome in a rough-hewn way, or that his hands looked capable of both gentleness and strength. "Your trunk," Ryder said suddenly, as if remembering his manners. He moved past her, catching the scent of soap and leather and something else, something wild like the prairie grass. He hoisted her trunk with ease. "My wagon is just there. I thought we might stop by the preacher's house if you are still willing, or we could wait if you would prefer to rest first." Faith's heart hammered against her ribs. She had agreed in her last letter to marry him immediately upon arrival, understanding that propriety demanded it if she was to live under his roof. "I am willing, Mr. Matthews. I gave you my word." Something flickered in his eyes, relief perhaps, or maybe disappointment that she showed no hesitation. "Ryder," he said. "You should call me Ryder, seeing as we are to be married within the hour. Then you must call me Faith." He nodded, carrying her trunk to a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses. Faith followed, acutely aware of the curious stares from townspeople going about their business. A mail-order bride was not an uncommon sight in frontier towns, but it still drew attention. The wagon ride to the preacher's small house took only minutes. Reverend Thomas was a kind-faced man in his 50s who showed no surprise at their arrival. "Mr. Matthews mentioned you might be coming by today," he said warmly, ushering them inside where his wife sat mending by the window. The ceremony was brief and simple. Faith stood beside Ryder in the preacher's front room, repeating words that bound her life to this stranger's. When Ryder slipped a simple gold band on her finger, his hands were steady, though she noticed a pulse jumping at his throat. His lips were warm and dry when they brushed hers, lasting only a moment before he stepped back. "Congratulations," Reverend Thomas said. May your union be blessed with happiness and children. Faith felt heat rise to her cheeks. Children. She had not allowed herself to think that far ahead, focused only on escape, on survival. Now she was married to a man she had known for less than an hour, bound to him in the eyes of God and the law. The ride to Ryder's ranch took them out of town along a well-worn road that cut through gently rolling prairie. The late summer grass was tall and golden, rippling in waves beneath the wind. Faith had never seen land so open, so vast. In Boston, buildings had hemmed her in on all sides. Here the sky stretched endlessly above, so blue it almost hurt to look at. "It is beautiful," she said softly. Ryder glanced at her, surprise evident on his face. "Most Eastern ladies find it too empty. My first wife, she never quite took to it, said it made her feel small." Faith considered this. "I spent the last 5 years feeling trapped. This openness, it feels like breathing for the first time." She did not elaborate, and Ryder did not press her, though she caught him looking at her with something like curiosity in his eyes. The ranch appeared gradually, first a windmill turning lazily in the breeze, then a barn and several outbuildings, and finally a house. It was larger than Faith had expected, a 2-story structure with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. White paint peeled in places, and the flower beds that had once flanked the steps were overgrown with weeds, but it had good bones, as her mother would have said. "I know it needs work," Ryder said, bringing the wagon to a stop. "My wife passed 2 years ago, and I have not had much time for the house. The ranch keeps me busy." "How did she die?" Faith asked, then immediately regretted her bluntness. "Forgive me, that was inappropriate." "Fever," Ryder said simply. "It swept through town one winter. Took her and our daughter both." The pain in his voice was old but still sharp. Faith felt her heart contract with sympathy. "I am so sorry," he nodded, climbing down from the wagon and coming around to help her. His hand spanned her waist as he lifted her down, and for a moment they stood very close, his face just above hers. Faith saw grief in his eyes, but also something else, something that looked like hope trying to break through clouds. Inside, the house was clean but sparse, clearly maintained by a man who saw to necessities but nothing more. The kitchen was large, dominated by a cast-iron stove and a wooden table. The front room held a sofa and 2 chairs, a bookshelf with a few volumes, and a fireplace. Ryder showed her the downstairs briefly before leading her upstairs to 3 bedrooms. "This was the main bedroom," he said, opening a door to reveal a large room with a double bed covered in a plain quilt. "I have been sleeping in the smaller room since Clara passed. I thought you might want this one for yourself if you prefer. I do not expect anything from you that you are not ready to give." Faith turned to look at him, this man who was now her husband. In his carefully worded letters, he had been respectful but reserved. She had assumed he wanted a marriage in full, but was offering her time out of decency. The relief she felt surprised her with its intensity. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That is very kind. I will bring your trunk up. There is water in the pitcher if you would like to wash. I need to see to the horses and check on the cattle. I have 3 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, good men who will treat you with respect. Come down when you are ready, and I will introduce you." After he left, Faith sank onto the bed, feeling the exhaustion of her journey settle into her bones. She had done it. She had escaped Boston, her stepfather's creditors, the wealthy old man he had tried to sell her to in marriage. She was safe now, married to a stranger who seemed decent at least, and who asked nothing of her but her presence in his home. She allowed herself 5 minutes to rest, then rose and washed her face and hands in the basin. Her reflection in the small mirror above the dresser showed a woman of 22 with dark auburn hair pinned up beneath her traveling hat, green eyes that looked too large in her pale face, and a mouth that her stepfather had called willful. She was not beautiful, but she was not plain either. Somewhere in between, which had always seemed to her the worst place to be, unpacking could wait. Faith made her way downstairs and out to the porch, shading her eyes against the lowering sun. Ryder stood by the barn talking to 3 men, gesturing toward the fields. When he saw her, he waved her over. "Faith, these are my hands. Tom Garrett, Pete Sullivan, and Danny Morton." The 3 men removed their hats. Tom was older, perhaps 40, with gray threading his beard. Pete looked to be in his 30s, stocky and strong. Danny was the youngest, probably not more than 20, with a shy smile. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Matthews," Tom said, and the others echoed him. "It is good to meet you as well," Faith replied. "I hope we will work well together." "Yes, madam," Tom said. "It will be nice to have a lady around the place again. Mr. Matthews is a good man, but his cooking leaves something to be desired." This drew chuckles from the other men, and even Ryder smiled slightly. "I will not argue with that assessment. Faith, would you like to see the ranch before dinner? Or are you too tired?" "I would like to see it," Faith said, surprising herself. But she wanted to understand this place, this land that was now her home. Ryder showed her the barn first, where horses nickered in their stalls and the smell of hay and animals was thick in the air. Then the chicken coop, where 24 hens pecked at scattered grain. The smokehouse, the root cellar, the equipment shed. Everything was well maintained, organized, cared for with the attention of a man who took pride in his work. Finally, they walked out beyond the buildings to where the land opened up, and Faith saw her first cattle, dozens of them grazing in the distance, their red and white hides bright against the gold prairie. "I run about 200 head," Ryder said. "It is not a huge operation, but it is mine, and it provides well enough. In a few weeks, we will drive them to the railhead in town. The money from that sale has to last most of the year, pay the hands, buy supplies." "It must be difficult work," Faith observed. "It is, but I would rather work for myself than anyone else. I came out here 8 years ago with almost nothing, built this ranch from the ground up." He paused, then added, "Clara hated it at first. She came from St. Louis, was used to city life. But she learned to love it eventually, or at least to tolerate it. I hope you will too." "I think I will," Faith said. "It is honest work, and there is honor in that." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the cattle graze as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The air had cooled slightly, carrying the scent of grass and earth and the promise of the coming night. "We should head back," Ryder said. "I will make dinner. Nothing fancy, just salt pork and beans." "I can cook," Faith offered. "That is, if you would like me to." "I am a decent cook, and I imagine you have other things to attend to." Relief washed over his face. "I would appreciate that. The kitchen is yours to command." Back at the house, Faith explored the pantry and found it well stocked with basics. She set to work, finding a rhythm in the familiar tasks of cooking. Ryder came in after washing up at the pump outside and sat at the table watching her work. "Your letters never mentioned why you wanted to leave Boston," he said after a while. "Only that you needed a fresh start." Faith kept her hands busy, slicing bread from a loaf she found wrapped in cloth. "My mother died 3 years ago. She had remarried after my father passed, and her second husband was not a kind man. When she died, I found myself alone with him and his debts. He saw me as a way to solve his financial problems. He wanted to sell you. It was not a question. Yes, to a man old enough to be my grandfather, a man with a reputation for cruelty toward his previous wives. I could not do it. I would have done anything to escape, even marry a stranger." Faith met his eyes. Even that. And so far, Mr. Matthews, you are proving to be a better bargain than I had hoped for. Ryder, he corrected gently, and you are proving to be more than I expected as well. Dinner was simple but good, and they ate mostly in silence, both exhausted from the day. Afterward, Faith cleaned up while Ryder went out to check on the animals one more time before bed. When he returned, he showed her how to bank the stove for the night and check that all the doors were secured. I rise early, he said as they stood at the base of the stairs. Before dawn, I try to be quiet, but the floorboards creak. I am used to early mornings, Faith assured him. I will have breakfast ready. You do not have to do that the first day. You should rest. I would prefer to be useful. He studied her face in the lamplight. You do not have to earn your place here, Faith. You are my wife now. This is your home. The words touched something deep inside her, something that had been cold and frightened for so long. Thank you, she whispered. Good night, then. Ryder hesitated, then reached out and squeezed her hand briefly before heading to his room. Faith climbed the stairs to the main bedroom, closing the door behind her. She changed into her nightgown and slipped between the sheets, which smelled of soap and sunshine. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the black velvet sky, more stars than she had ever imagined existed. For the first time in years, Faith fell asleep with hope in her heart. The rooster woke her before dawn, its crowing loud and insistent. Faith rose quickly, dressing in a simple work dress of gray cotton. Downstairs, she found the house empty, Ryder already out doing his morning chores. She built up the fire in the stove and set coffee to boil, then began mixing batter for flapjacks. By the time Ryder came in, stomping dust off his boots on the porch, the kitchen smelled of coffee and cooking breakfast. He stopped in the doorway, surprise evident on his face. I told you to rest, he said, but there was no anger in his voice. And I told you I prefer to be useful. Faith flipped a flapjack expertly. There is coffee on the table. They ate together as the sun rose, painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Ryder asked her about Boston, and she told him carefully edited stories of her childhood, of her father who had been a clerk, of her mother who had loved to read. She did not speak much of the years after her mother's remarriage, and he did not press. In turn, he told her about growing up on a farm in Ohio, about coming west with dreams of having his own land, about meeting Clara at a church social and courting her for 6 months before they married. She was a good woman, he said, staring into his coffee. I loved her. But we were not well matched, if I am honest. She wanted things I could not give her, a life I was not built for. We made do and we were content mostly, but I wonder sometimes if she was truly happy. What about your daughter? Faith asked softly. Pain flickered across his face. Sarah. She was 4, full of energy and questions and laughter. She was the joy of my life. He swallowed hard. Losing her nearly broke me. For months after, I could barely function. Tom and the others kept the ranch going. I do not know what I would have done without them. Faith reached across the table and placed her hand over his. I am sorry. No parent should have to bury a child. Ryder turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. They sat like that for a long moment, connected by shared grief, by understanding of loss. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were clearer. I should get to work, he said. Tom wants to move the herd to the north pasture today. Will you be all right here alone? Of course. I have plenty to keep me busy. After he left, Faith spent the day exploring her new home more thoroughly, making a mental list of what needed to be done. The house needed a thorough cleaning, the kind that took days and involved moving furniture and washing windows and beating rugs. The garden needed to be reclaimed from the weeds. Mending piled in a basket by the sofa spoke of months of neglect. She started with the kitchen, scrubbing every surface until it gleamed. It felt good to work, to make this place more like a home. By the time Ryder returned for the noon meal, she had bread rising and stew bubbling on the stove. "You have been busy," he observed, looking around the transformed kitchen. "It needed doing. I hope you do not mind." "Mind, Faith. This place has not looked this good in 2 years. Thank you." They fell into a routine over the following days. Ryder would rise before dawn and do his chores, then come in for breakfast. He would work the ranch all morning, return for the noon meal, work through the afternoon, and come home as the sun set for supper. Faith cleaned and cooked and mended, reclaiming the house room by room from the neglect of widowerhood. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one, talking about their days. Slowly, carefully, they were building something, learning each other's rhythms and habits and histories. A week after her arrival, Faith decided to tackle the garden. She spent the morning pulling weeds and turning soil, the sun hot on her back. She was bent over a particularly stubborn root when she heard horses approaching. Looking up, she saw 3 riders coming up the road. 2 were men, rough-looking and unkempt. The third was a woman, surprisingly, dressed in pants and a man's shirt, with blonde hair tied back in a braid. They reined in near the porch, and the woman dismounted. "You must be the new Mrs. Matthews," she said, her voice friendly. "I am Jane Fletcher. My husband and I have the ranch 5 miles west. These are my brothers, Henry and George Harper." The 2 men tipped their hats but did not dismount. Faith brushed dirt from her hands and came forward. "It is nice to meet you. Would you like to come in for coffee?" "I would love that," Jane said. "Boys, you can head back. Tell Robert I will be along shortly." The brothers rode off, and Jane followed Faith into the house. Inside, Jane looked around with approval. "You have been busy. This place looks like a home again. Ryder is a good man, but he was drowning in his grief. It is good he found you." "I hope I can be what he needs," Faith said, pouring coffee. Jane studied her with shrewd blue eyes. "You are running from something." It was not a question. Faith's hand stilled on the coffee pot. "What makes you say that?" "Because I recognize the look. I came west running too, from a father who drank away everything we had in a town where everyone knew it. No one comes to the frontier unless they are looking for something or running from something. Usually both." Faith relaxed slightly. "Yes, I was running. From a life I did not want, from choices that were not mine to make. And now I am here, married to a man who treats me with kindness. I count that as a blessing." "Ryder is one of the best men I know," Jane said, "but he is still hurting. Losing Clara and Sarah broke something in him. He hides it well, but it is there. Just be patient with him." "I will." Jane stayed for an hour, filling Faith in on the other ranchers in the area, the social dynamics of Galesburg, the upcoming harvest dance in town. It was the first real conversation Faith had with another woman since leaving Boston, and she found herself grateful for the company. After Jane left, Faith returned to the garden with renewed energy. She was planting a row of late-season vegetables she had bought in town when Ryder rode up, dismounting quickly and striding over with concern on his face. Jane said she stopped by. "I hope her brothers did not cause any trouble." "No trouble at all. Jane is nice. She invited us to a dance in town next month." Ryder frowned. "I do not usually attend social functions." "Why not?" "After Clara died, people looked at me with pity. I hated it, so I stopped going to town except when necessary." Faith stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "I understand that, but people will talk if you hide me away out here. They will think there is something wrong." "I am not hiding you. Then come to the dance with me. Let people see that we are building a life together." He studied her for a long moment. "Is that what we are doing? Building a life?" "I thought so. Is that not what you wanted when you sent for me? I suppose I did not think much beyond having help with the house. But yes, I suppose I hoped for more eventually. Faith stepped closer to him, close enough to see the lighter flecks of blue in his gray eyes. I am not asking for your heart, Ryder. I know it still belongs to Clara. But I would like to be your partner, your friend. I would like this marriage to be more than just an arrangement. I would like that too, he said quietly. And Faith, my heart does not belong to Clara anymore. I loved her, I will always love her memory, but she is gone. I am still here, and so are you. Maybe it is time I stopped living in the past. Hope bloomed in Faith's chest, warm and bright. Maybe it is. That night at dinner, Ryder told her stories about the ranch, about his plans to expand the herd, about his dreams for the future. Faith listened and asked questions and offered opinions, and Ryder seemed to value her input. It was the first time she had felt like a true partner to anyone, the first time her thoughts were considered worth hearing. The next Sunday, Ryder asked if she would like to attend church in town. Faith agreed, and they dressed in their best clothes and took the wagon into Galesburg. The service was held in a small white church on the main street, and Faith felt dozens of eyes on her as she walked in on Ryder's arm. Reverend Thomas welcomed them warmly, and after the service, several women approached to introduce themselves. Mrs. Palmer, who ran the general store with her husband. Mrs. Chen, whose family had come from China to work on the railroad and stayed to open a restaurant. Young Mrs. Walsh, heavily pregnant with her first child. They were kind, if curious, and Faith felt some of her nervousness ease. On the ride home, Ryder seemed lighter, more relaxed than she had seen him. That was not as bad as I expected, he admitted. People are not as judgmental as we fear sometimes, Faith said. They just want to be friendly. Clara used to say something similar. She loved socializing, going to town events. I was always more comfortable with just the cattle and horses. We do not have to go often if you do not enjoy it, but occasionally I think it would be good for both of us to connect with the community. Once a month, Ryder compromised. We can attend church once a month, and any social events you think are important. That seems fair. September arrived, bringing cooler nights and the first hints of autumn color to the trees along the creek that ran through Ryder's property. Faith had been on the ranch for a month, and she felt herself settling into this new life like a seed taking root in good soil. She and Ryder had developed an easy companionship, built on respect and growing affection. They talked every evening, sometimes about important things, sometimes about nothing at all. He had begun to smile more, laugh occasionally at her dry observations about ranch life. And Faith found herself watching for his return each day, feeling a flutter in her chest when she saw him riding up the path. The harvest dance approached, and Faith spent an evening altering one of her better dresses, a deep green silk that brought out her eyes. She had not worn it since leaving Boston, had not had occasion to dress up for anything. The night of the dance, she stood before the mirror in her room, pinning up her hair and feeling butterflies in her stomach. When she came downstairs, Ryder was waiting in his Sunday suit, his hair still damp from washing. He stared at her as she descended, his eyes widening. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you." Faith felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You look very handsome yourself." The ride to town was quiet, both of them nervous for different reasons. The dance was being held in the town hall, which had been decorated with bunting and lanterns. Music spilled out into the street, fiddle and guitar and the stomp of dancing feet. Inside, the hall was crowded with people, ranchers and townspeople dressed in their finest. Jane Fletcher spotted them immediately and came over with her husband Robert, a tall man with a quiet demeanor. "You came," Jane exclaimed. "Faith, You look stunning." "Ryder, you clean up pretty well yourself." Robert shook Ryder's hand. "Good to see you out and about, Matthews. Been too long." Other people approached to greet them, more friendly than curious now. Faith met what felt like dozens of people, trying to remember names and faces. When the music started up again, several men approached to ask her to dance, but she looked to Ryder first. "Would you like to dance?" she asked him. "I am not much of a dancer," he admitted, "but for you I will try." He led her onto the floor and they moved through a simple waltz. Ryder was stiff at first, clearly uncomfortable, but as the music played, he began to relax. Faith found herself enjoying the feeling of his hand at her waist, the way he looked down at her with something like wonder in his eyes. "I have not danced in years," he murmured. "Forgot how nice it could be. I am glad you are willing to try." They danced 2 more songs before Ryder needed a break. He brought her punch and they stood against the wall, watching the other dancers. Jane and Robert whirled past, clearly well-practiced partners. Young couples courted under the watchful eyes of their parents. The community was on full display, and Faith felt a warmth in her chest at being part of it. Tom Garrett approached, asking permission to dance with Faith. Ryder nodded, and Faith found herself being led through a lively reel by the older ranch hand. Tom was light on his feet despite his age, and he made her laugh with his running commentary on the other dancers. When the dance ended, Faith returned to Ryder, breathless and happy. But her smile faded when she saw his expression. He was staring across the room at something, his face pale, jaw tight. "What is wrong?" Faith asked. "Nothing. I just need some air." He strode toward the door, leaving Faith to hurry after him. Outside, the night air was cool and fresh. Ryder stood at the edge of the light spilling from the hall, his hands clenched at his sides. "Ryder, what happened?" "Her parents are here. Clara's parents. I have not seen them since the funeral. They blamed me, said if I had taken Clara and Sarah to St. Louis when the fever started, they might have lived." Faith's heart ached for him. "That is not fair. You could not have known." "But what if they were right? What if I killed my own wife and daughter by being stubborn, by refusing to leave the ranch?" "You cannot think like that. Fever is unpredictable. They might have caught it on the journey or in St. Louis. You cannot blame yourself for the workings of fate." He turned to look at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I think about it every day, what I could have done differently, how I failed them." Faith stepped close, placing her hands on his chest. "You did not fail them. You loved them, you gave them a home and a life. That is all anyone can do. The rest is in God's hands." "I do not deserve you," Ryder said softly. "I do not deserve your kindness or your patience." "Yes, you do. You deserve to be happy, Ryder. You deserve to live, not just exist in your grief." He raised his hand slowly, cupping her cheek. "You make me want to live again. These past weeks with you, I have felt like maybe I could be whole again. You can be. We both can be." Ryder leaned down, his forehead touching hers. "Can I kiss you? A real kiss, not like at the wedding?" "Yes," Faith whispered. His lips met hers, soft at first, then deeper, more urgent. Faith felt something awaken inside her, something that had been dormant for so long she had forgotten it existed. She kissed him back, her arms wrapping around his neck, pressing close. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Ryder looked stunned, his eyes dark with emotion. "I am falling in love with you," he said. "I did not expect it, did not think I could love anyone again, but I am." Joy burst through Faith like sunrise. "I am falling in love with you too." They stood in the moonlight, holding each other, the music from the dance hall distant and dreamlike. In that moment, Faith felt the last of her fear fall away. She had come west hoping only for safety, for escape. But she had found so much more. She had found home. They did not return to the dance. Instead, they walked to the wagon and began the journey back to the ranch, sitting close on the bench seat, Ryder's arm around Faith's shoulders. The stars overhead were brilliant, the prairie vast and beautiful around them. At the house, Ryder helped Faith down from the wagon, but instead of going inside, he led her to the porch. They sat on the steps, unwilling to let the night end. "Tell me about your dreams," Faith said. "What do you want for the future?" Ryder was quiet for a moment. "I want to expand the ranch, maybe double the size of the herd. I want to build a new barn, bigger and better. I want to travel a bit, see some of the country beyond Illinois. And I want a family again, children to fill this house with noise and laughter." "That sounds like a good dream. What about you? What do you want?" Faith leaned her head on his shoulder. "I want to be a true partner to you, to help build this ranch into something we can be proud of. I want to create a home where people feel welcome and loved. And yes, I want children too when the time is right. I want to build a life that is ours, not what anyone else expects or demands." "We will build it together," Ryder promised. That night, for the first time, Ryder came to Faith's room after they had said goodnight. He knocked softly on her door, and when she opened it, he stood in the hallway looking uncertain. "I do not want to sleep alone anymore," he said. "If you are willing, I would like to be a husband to you in all ways, but only if you want that too." Faith's answer was to take his hand and draw him into the room. They came together with the desperate sweetness of two people who had been lonely for too long, who had found in each other an unexpected gift. Afterward, they lay entwined in the bed, Faith's head on Ryder's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "None. You? Only that I did not do this sooner." Fall deepened into October, and the ranch prepared for the cattle drive to town. It would take 2 days to move the herd to the railhead, where buyers would assess and purchase the cattle. This sale represented most of Ryder's income for the year, and Faith could see the tension in his shoulders as the day approached. What if the price is down? He worried the night before the drive. What if something happens to the herd on the way? "Then we will manage," Faith said firmly. "We will cut back where we can and make it work, but you cannot borrow trouble before it arrives." The day of the drive, Faith rose before dawn to make a huge breakfast for Ryder and the 3 ranch hands. They would be gone for 3 days, and she would be alone at the ranch for the first time since her arrival. "Will you be all right?" Ryder asked, strapping his bedroll to his horse. "I will be fine. I have the shotgun if I need it, and I know how to use it. Go, make us a good profit." He kissed her hard, then swung into the saddle. Faith watched as he and the others drove the cattle down the road, the herd a river of red and white, the dust rising golden in the morning sun. The first day alone was strange. Faith kept busy cleaning and cooking, working in the garden, feeding the chickens. But she found herself listening for Ryder's return, missing his presence in ways she had not expected. The house felt too empty, too quiet. The second day, she decided to ride out to the north pasture to check on the dozen cattle they had kept back for breeding. Ryder had taught her to ride, and she had grown comfortable on the gentle mare he had assigned her. The ride was pleasant, the autumn air crisp and clear. She found the cattle grazing peacefully, but as she turned to ride back, she noticed a section of fence was down. Several posts had rotted through and collapsed. Faith dismounted to inspect the damage, making a mental note to tell Ryder when he returned. She was remounting when she heard a sound that made her blood run cold, a low growl coming from the tall grass nearby. Faith turned slowly to see a coyote, larger than any she had seen before, its eyes fixed on her. The mare stamped nervously, sensing danger. Faith knew that coyotes usually avoided humans, but this one looked sick, foam at its mouth, moving with a strange, jerky gait. Rabid, she realized with horror. The coyote lunged and the mare reared. Faith lost her grip and fell hard, The wind knocked from her lungs. The mare bolted and Faith scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering. The coyote was between her and the direction home, snarling and snapping. Faith backed away slowly, not taking her eyes off the animal. She had no weapon, nothing to defend herself with. The coyote crouched, preparing to spring, and Faith knew she was out of options. A shot rang out sharp and clear. The coyote dropped, killed instantly. Faith spun to see Jane Fletcher on horseback, a rifle in her hands. "Are you hurt?" Jane called, dismounting quickly. "No, just shaken." Faith's legs felt weak with relief. "Thank God you came along. I saw your mare running loose and came to investigate. That coyote is definitely rabid. You were lucky." Jane helped Faith catch the mare, then insisted on riding with her back to the ranch. Once there, Jane checked Faith over for injuries and pronounced her fine except for some bruising. "Does Ryder know you ride out alone?" Jane asked. "He does, but usually I do not go far. I was just checking the herd. You should wait until he is back before going out again. The prairie can be dangerous, especially for someone not used to it." Faith agreed, still rattled from the encounter. Jane stayed for coffee, keeping Faith company until the afternoon, and when she finally left, Faith felt grateful for her friendship. When Ryder returned 3 days later, Faith ran out to meet him, throwing her arms around him before he had even fully dismounted. He held her tight, surprised by her fierce greeting. "I missed you too," he said, laughing. "The drive went well. We got a good price. I am so glad you are home. I have something to tell you." Over dinner, Faith recounted the incident with the rabid coyote. Ryder's face went pale, then red with anger. "You could have been killed," he said tightly. "But I was not. Jane came along at the right moment. You should not have been out there alone in the first place. What if Jane had not been nearby? What if the coyote had bitten you?" "I was checking on our cattle, doing what needed to be done," Faith said, her own temper rising. "I will not be a delicate flower locked in the house. If I am to be a rancher's wife, I need to know the land and the work. I do not want you to be a delicate flower. I just want you safe. Then teach me more about surviving out here. Teach me to shoot better, to read the signs of danger. Do not wrap me in cotton and expect me to be content." Ryder stared at her for a long moment, then his anger seemed to deflate. "You are right. I am sorry. I just got scared thinking about what might have happened." "I got scared too," Faith admitted, "but we are both fine and now we know to be more careful." The next day, Ryder spent hours with Faith at the shooting range he had set up behind the barn. He taught her to shoot accurately with both the rifle and the pistol, to reload quickly, to stay calm under pressure. By the end of the day, Faith felt more confident in her ability to protect herself. That night, as they lay in bed, Ryder held her close. "You are remarkable, you know that. Most women would have been terrified, would have refused to leave the house after something like that. I told you once that I would rather die than live trapped. I meant it. I will not let fear rule my life." "Another thing I love about you," Ryder murmured, kissing her temple. Winter arrived early that year, with the first snow falling in November. Faith had never experienced a frontier winter, and she quickly learned it was far harsher than anything she had known in Boston. The wind howled across the open prairie, driving snow into drifts that reached the porch roof. Temperatures dropped so low that water left in a cup would freeze solid overnight. But the house was snug and warm, the stove always burning, and Faith found a strange beauty in the white landscape. She and Ryder spent the long evenings together, reading aloud or playing cards or simply talking. Sometimes, Ryder would play the harmonica he kept in a drawer, simple melodies that filled the house with music. Christmas came, and Faith made it special, decorating with evergreen branches and cooking a feast. She gave Ryder a new leather belt she had bought in town and tooled herself with his initials. He gave her a beautiful shawl, soft blue wool he had ordered from Chicago. "I love it," Faith said, wrapping it around her shoulders. "How did you know blue was my favorite color?" "I pay attention," Ryder said, smiling. "I notice everything about you." They attended Christmas service in town, and afterward, several families invited them for dinner, but Ryder declined politely. "I want you to myself today," he told Faith on the drive home. They spent the afternoon in bed, making love slowly and thoroughly. The world narrowed to just the two of them. Afterward, Faith lay with her head on Ryder's chest, tracing idle patterns on his skin. "This is the happiest Christmas I can remember," she said softly. "For me too. Better than I thought possible a year ago. What were you doing last Christmas? Drinking too much whiskey and feeling sorry for myself." Ryder caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "You saved me, Faith. I was drowning and you threw me a rope." "We saved each other," Faith corrected. "I was drowning too." January brought a cold snap so severe that even going out to the barn was dangerous. The cattle huddled in sheltered areas, and Ryder and the hands worked in shifts to break ice in the water troughs and ensure the animals had enough hay. Faith worried every time Ryder went out, terrified he would freeze or get lost in a whiteout. One particularly bad night, Ryder did not return when expected. Faith paced the house, watching the window as the snow fell thick and fast. An hour passed, then two. Finally, she could stand it no longer. She bundled herself in her heaviest coat and boots and headed to the barn. She found Tom Garrett there, tending the horses. "Have you seen Ryder?" she asked. "He went to check the south fence line about 3 hours ago. Should have been back by now." Fear clawed at Faith's throat. "We have to find him. We cannot go out in this. We would be lost ourselves in minutes." But Faith was already saddling the mare, her hands shaking. "I am going. Stay here if you want." Tom grabbed her arm. "Wait. At least take the rope. We will tie one end here and you can follow it back." They secured a long rope to the barn door, and Faith rode out into the storm, paying out the rope behind her. The wind was brutal, cutting through her layers like knives. She could barely see 5 feet ahead, but she pushed on, calling Ryder's name. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, she heard a faint shout. Following the sound, she found Ryder huddled against a fallen tree, his horse standing over him protectively. "Faith, what are you doing out here?" His voice was weak, slurred with cold. "Saving your stubborn hide. Can you ride?" "I think so. Got thrown when my horse spooked. Hit my head. Must have passed out for a bit." Faith helped him mount, then led both horses back along the rope, fighting the wind and snow every step. When they finally reached the barn, Tom helped get Ryder inside the house. They stripped off his frozen clothes and wrapped him in blankets by the stove. "You could have died," Faith said, her voice shaking as she rubbed his hands between hers, trying to restore circulation. "But I did not, because you came for me." Ryder looked up at her, his eyes dark and serious. "That was incredibly brave and incredibly foolish. I could not lose you. Not now, not when I have finally found happiness. You will not lose me, I promise." Ryder recovered quickly, though he had a colorful bruise on his temple and complained of headaches for a few days. But the incident seemed to shift something between them, deepening their connection. They had both been willing to risk everything for the other, and that knowledge bound them together more surely than any wedding vow. As winter slowly released its grip, and the first hints of spring appeared, Faith realized she had not had her monthly courses in some time. At first, she dismissed it as stress or the harsh winter, but as the weeks passed and other signs appeared, she could no longer deny the truth. She was with child. Faith sat in the kitchen one March morning, her hands pressed to her still flat stomach, joy and terror warring inside her. She wanted this baby, wanted to give Ryder the family he had lost. But she also remembered his daughter Sarah, remembered the pain of losing a child. What if something went wrong? Ryder came in for breakfast, stomping mud off his boots. Spring had turned the ranch into a sea of mud, and everything was perpetually damp and dirty. He stopped when he saw Faith's face. "What is wrong? Are you ill?" "No, not ill. I have something to tell you, and I am not sure how you will take it." He sat down across from her, concern etched on his features. "You can tell me anything." Faith took a deep breath. "I am going to have a baby. I am fairly certain I am about 3 months along." Ryder went very still. For a long moment he said nothing, and Faith felt her heart sink. Then he stood abruptly and crossed to her, pulling her up and into his arms, holding her so tightly she could hardly breathe. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Faith asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "Happy." "Faith, I am terrified and thrilled and grateful. I never thought I would have another child. I did not dare hope for it." He pulled back to look at her face, and she saw tears streaming down his cheeks. "You have given me so much, a reason to live, to hope, to dream again. And now this." Faith was crying too, relief making her weak. "I am scared. What if something happens? What if the baby, we will face whatever comes together," Ryder said firmly. "But we will not borrow trouble. We will take each day as it comes and trust that God will watch over us." The news spread quickly, as news always did in small communities. Jane Fletcher came by with gifts and advice. The women from church brought meals and offers of help. Even Tom and the other ranch hands seemed pleased, handling Faith like spun glass and insisting she not overwork herself. Spring blossomed into summer, and Faith's belly grew round. Ryder was constantly worried about her, trying to limit her work, but Faith refused to be treated as an invalid. She continued to cook and clean and tend the garden, though she let him handle the heavier tasks. One hot July evening they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ryder's hand resting on Faith's belly. The baby was active, kicking and moving constantly. "Have you thought about names?" Ryder asked. "A few. For a boy, I like Matthew or Thomas. For a girl, maybe Rose or Emma." "Sarah always wanted a little brother," Ryder said quietly. "She used to ask when she would get one. I told her maybe someday." He paused. "Is it all right if I talk about her sometimes? I do not want you to think I am living in the past. Of course you can talk about her. She was your daughter, and she will always be part of you. I would never ask you to forget her. You are an amazing woman, Faith Matthews. I try." In September, Faith went into labor 2 weeks earlier than the doctor had predicted. Ryder sent Tom racing to town to fetch Dr. Morrison and to alert the women who had volunteered to help. Jane arrived first, taking charge with calm efficiency. The labor was long and difficult. Faith had never known pain like this, waves of agony that threatened to overwhelm her. But Ryder stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face, murmuring encouragement. Finally, as the sun rose on a new day, Faith pushed one last time, and the baby emerged into the world with a lusty cry. Dr. Morrison held up the infant, red-faced and squalling. "It is a boy," he announced. "A healthy baby boy." The doctor placed the baby on Faith's chest, and she looked down at her son through tears of exhaustion and joy. He had dark hair like his father, and when he opened his eyes briefly, they were the same gray-blue. Ryder leaned over them both, his face a study in wonder. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Faith. Thank you." They named him Thomas Matthew Matthews, called him Tom after the ranch hand who had become like family. The baby was strong and healthy, nursing well and growing quickly. Ryder was a devoted father, rising in the night to bring the baby to Faith when he cried, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with his son when he was fussy. Watching Ryder with their son, Faith fell even more deeply in love with her husband. He was gentle and patient, singing soft songs and telling ridiculous stories to a baby too young to understand. The grief that had haunted him when they met had lifted, replaced by a joy that radiated from him like sunlight. Young Tom was 6 months old when Faith realized she was pregnant again. This time, the news was less of a shock, though no less joyful. Their second child, a daughter they named Catherine Rose, was born in June, just before Tom's first birthday. 2 under 2, Jane laughed when she came to visit and found Faith juggling both children. "You will have your hands full." "I would not have it any other way," Faith said, and she meant it. Life on the ranch was busy and sometimes chaotic, but it was full of love. Ryder expanded the herd as he had planned, building the new barn with help from neighbors. Tom Garrett and the other hands became like uncles to the children, spoiling them with carved toys and indulgent attention. The years passed in a blur of seasons, of children growing and the ranch prospering. Faith and Ryder added to their family with careful planning, eventually having 4 children total: Tom, Catherine, and then 2 more daughters, Anne and Grace. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ryder surprised Faith with a trip to Chicago. They left the children with Jane and Robert Fletcher and took the train east, staying in a fine hotel and seeing the sights like tourists. It was strange to be away from the ranch, from their children, but also wonderful to focus only on each other for a few days. "You ever regret coming west?" Ryder asked one evening as they walked along the lakeshore. "Do you miss city life?" Faith squeezed his hand. "Never. Everything I want is in Galesburg. My home, my children, my life with you. I would not trade it for anything." "Even though it is not what you expected when you answered my advertisement. Especially because it is not what I expected. I thought I was looking for safety, for escape. But I found so much more. I found love and purpose and a place where I truly belong." Ryder pulled her close, kissing her as the sun set over the lake. "I love you, Faith Matthews, more than I ever thought possible. I love you too. Always." They returned to the ranch to find their children thriving and the cattle doing well. Tom Garrett had retired the previous year, and they had hired 2 new hands to help with the growing operation. The ranch was more successful than Ryder had ever dreamed, and they had even bought additional land, expanding their holdings. Their children grew into capable, confident young people. Young Tom showed a gift for ranching, following his father everywhere and learning the business. Catherine was quiet and thoughtful, preferring books to horses but fiercely loyal to her family. Anne was the wild one, always climbing trees and getting into mischief. Grace, the baby, was sweet and gentle, with a gift for music. Faith loved watching them grow, loved the chaos and noise and constant activity. The house that had once been so quiet and sad was now filled with laughter and life. She thought sometimes about the frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Galesburg all those years ago, and marveled at how much had changed. One autumn evening, when Tom was 15 and Grace was 8, the whole family sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. Ryder had his arm around Faith, and she leaned into his solid warmth, content in a way she had never thought possible. "Tell us how you met," Catherine said suddenly. She was 11, at an age where romance was beginning to fascinate her. "You have heard that story 100 times, Faith said, but she was smiling. "Tell it again," Anne begged. "Please." So Faith told them, with Ryder adding details and corrections about the mail-order bride who came west with hope in her eyes, and the rancher who gave her a reason to keep it. She told them about their awkward wedding, their slow courtship, the moment when friendship became love. Did you know right away that Mother was special? Young Tom asked his father. Ryder considered this. Not right away, no, but I knew she was brave, coming all this way to start over. And I knew she was kind, accepting me with all my grief and pain. The love came later, growing slowly like the prairie grass, until one day I looked around and realized it was everywhere as far as I could see. That is the best kind of love, Faith said softly. The kind that grows and deepens with time, that is built on trust and respect and genuine affection. Better than love at first sight, Catherine asked. Ever the romantic? Much better, Ryder said, because it lasts. It endures through hard times and good times, through all the seasons of life. The children eventually went to bed, leaving Faith and Ryder alone under the stars. The night was cool, autumn announcing its presence with crisp air and the scent of drying grass. You ever think about how different things might have been? Faith asked. If I had not answered your advertisement, if you had chosen someone else? I try not to think about it, Ryder admitted. It terrifies me, the idea of a life without you. You and the children, this life we have built together, it is everything to me. For me too. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, bound together by years of shared experience, of joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle. The ranch spread out around them in the darkness, the cattle settled for the night, the horses safe in the barn. Everything they had worked for, everything they had built together. Thank you, Ryder said suddenly. For what? For taking a chance on a broken widower with more grief than sense. For seeing past my pain to the man I could be again. For giving me a family and a future I never thought I would have. Faith turned to face him, cupping his face in her hands. Thank you for giving me a home, for treating me with kindness and respect when I had known so little of either, for loving me, not despite my scars and fears, but with them. Ryder kissed her, sweet and deep, a kiss that still had the power to make her heart race even after 10 years of marriage. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. Come to bed, Faith said, standing and pulling him up with her. The children will be awake at dawn and we need our rest. They walked inside together, locking the door behind them, climbing the stairs to their bedroom. The house creaked and settled around them, familiar and beloved, a testament to their life together. As they lay in bed, Faith thought about the girl she had been, desperate and afraid, stepping off that stagecoach with nothing but hope to sustain her. She had been so young, so naive about what lay ahead. But she had been brave too, brave enough to risk everything for a chance at something better. And she had found it, not just safety or security, but love, real and lasting and true. A family, a home, a purpose. Everything she had ever wanted and so much more. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Ryder replied, his arms tightening around her, always and forever. Faith smiled, closing her eyes and let sleep take her, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring more of this beautiful, complicated, wonderful life they had built together. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their growing children. Young Tom married a neighboring rancher's daughter and built a house on the far side of their land, working the ranch alongside his father. Catherine went east to attend college, becoming a teacher and returning to Galesburg to teach at the local school. Anne married a banker from Chicago and moved to the city, though she visited often with her children. Grace stayed close to home, helping her mother and eventually marrying one of the ranch hands. Faith and Ryder aged together, their hair graying, their faces lined with years of sun and work and laughter. But the love between them never faded. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by time into something unbreakable. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house was full of noise and life. children running everywhere, the smell of cooking filling every room. Faith stood in her kitchen, the same kitchen she had first cleaned all those years ago, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Ryder came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy anniversary, my love. Happy anniversary." Faith leaned back against him, comfortable and content. 30 years. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like a lifetime. Other days it feels like just yesterday that you stepped off that stagecoach, looking so brave and so scared all at once. "I was terrified," Faith admitted, "but also hopeful. I think that hope was the only thing that kept me going in those early days. I am glad you did not give up. On me, on us, on this life. Never. This is everything I ever wanted, even when I did not know I wanted it." They stood together, watching their family through the kitchen window. Young Tom was teaching his son to rope a fence post. Catherine was reading to several grandchildren under a tree. Anne was laughing at something her husband said. Grace was helping set up tables for dinner. "We did good," Ryder said softly. "Built something real and lasting." "We did," Faith agreed. "And it all started with a leap of faith. Mine and yours." That night, after the guests had gone home and the house was quiet again, Faith and Ryder sat on their porch as they had done countless times over the years. The stars overhead were the same stars that had witnessed their wedding night, their children's births, every joy and sorrow of their life together. "You remember what you told the children that night about love growing like prairie grass?" Faith asked. "I do. You were right. Our love has filled all the empty spaces, covered all the scars. It is everywhere I look as far as I can see." Ryder took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "You are the best decision I ever made, sending that advertisement, choosing you from all the responses I received. Best decision of my life." Answering it was mine. They sat until the night grew cold, reluctant to leave the peace and beauty of the moment. Finally, Ryder stood and helped Faith to her feet, and they went inside together, still hand in hand. Faith knew that they would not have many more years together. They were both in their 50s now, and the life of a rancher was hard, aging people before their time. But she did not fear the future. Whatever came, they would face it together as they always had. And when the time came for one of them to leave this world, the other would grieve, yes, but also celebrate. Celebrate a love that had transformed two broken people into something whole. Celebrate a family built on respect and affection. Celebrate a life well lived together. For now, though, they had this moment. This night, this home, this life, and it was enough. More than enough, it was everything.